Have you ever played a game that feels like it's actively trying to kill you? I'm not just talking about difficulty here. I mean a game that seemingly hates your guts. A game that tosses you into the middle of a war-torn country, gives you a gun that jams every third shot, and says, good luck, oh and don't forget your malaria pills. Welcome to Far Cry 2, a game where you're not the hero, you're just another mercenary in a country falling apart, sent to kill a man who might actually be the only one trying to stop the chaos. A game where your best friend might die in a burning hut because you hesitated for half a second. Where you'll get betrayed, ambushed, and probably blown up by a jeep convoy every time you try to drive anywhere. Released in 2008, this is the odd child of the Far Cry series. The one that ditched mutants and secret islands for sun-scorched savannas and moral ambiguity. It's frustrating, fascinating, wildly ambitious, and even after all these years, there's nothing quite like it. So, grab your rusted AK, inject your malaria meds, and join me as we dive back into one of the most punishing, brutal, and misunderstood shooters of the 7th generation. This is Far Cry 2, 16 years later. So, picture this. It's the mid-2000s. Far Cry is still that weird German sci-fi shooter with mutants, super soldiers, and a Hawaiian shirt wearing guy named Jack Carver yelling at helicopters. It's got Crytek's new engine, flashy graphics, and about as much subtlety as a Michael Bay movie marathon. Ubisoft had just published the first game, but they didn't own the engine, so instead of trying to out Crytek, they did something unexpected. They started over. And what they made next wasn't just a sequel, it was a full-blown reinvention. A game that would throw away the goofy sci-fi nonsense and replace it with something real, something ugly, something uncomfortably human. Enter Far Cry 2, developed by Ubisoft Montreal and built on a brand new in-house engine, Dunia. A heavily modified fork of CryEngine that they essentially ripped apart and rebuilt from scratch. Why? Because they wanted systems. They wanted fire propagation, AI that could track you for miles, full day-night cycles, and that sweet immersive sim flavor. Basically, let's make a living, breathing open world, and then let the players slowly die inside of it. The pitch was simple, Far Cry as a grounded African civil war simulator. And no, I'm not kidding. The team did field research in East Africa, studied real-world conflicts, and tried to reflect the complexity of war without picking a side. You're a mercenary, caught in the middle of two factions, both of which suck, in a setting deliberately designed to be morally grey, narratively sparse, and filled with consequences you couldn't just reload your way out of. One of the core ideas? Everything you do should come at a cost. Want to drive to a mission? Cool, but get ready to plow through 5 checkpoints and possibly set half the savannah on fire. Want to use that cool new gun? Better hope it doesn't jam mid-fight. Want to help your buddy? Hope you brought enough Syrettes, because they're gonna run out into the open and need 3 shotgun shells in the process. The devs were obsessed with this kind of emergent storytelling, where chaos wasn't just possible, it was encouraged. A fire spreading from a Molotov, a truck ambush gone wrong, a mission where the buddy you just saved ends up bleeding out in a ditch because you got distracted by a convoy. Nothing in this game was clean, nothing was cinematic. It was all raw, mechanical, and in the moment. And yeah, that ambition came with some casualties, namely fun. A lot of players bounced off the game because it was just too much, too aggressive, too hostile. But for those that stuck with it, it was one of the most unique FPS experiences of the generation. It didn't want to be Call of Duty. Hell, it didn't even want to be Far Cry 1. It wanted to be a survivalist nightmare wrapped in the skin of an open world shooter. And in that regard, Ubisoft Montreal nailed it, even if they terrified half their audience in the process. Let's talk about how Far Cry 2 looks, or rather, how it feels to look at. Because visually, this game is less eye candy and more sunburned redness and dirt in your teeth. It doesn't want to dazzle you, it wants you to sweat. Everything about the art direction screams heat, dehydration, and desperation. The world isn't just dusty, it's oppressive. The lighting doesn't just simulate sun, it weaponizes it. Instead of hyper-saturated jungles or neon HUD elements, you get washed out color palettes, a heavy orange filter, and visual noise baked right into the engine. The game loves throwing heat gaze, motion blur, and dust particles at you like it's trying to physically exhaust your GPU. And back in 2008, it probably did. But here's the thing, it works. Not in a wow, this looks beautiful kind of way, but in a holy shit, I believe this place exists and I want to leave immediately kind of way. The Dunya engine, despite being a Frankenstein monster of CryEngine code and Ubisoft wizardry, absolutely sells the environment. The dynamic weather and day and night cycles aren't just cosmetic. They directly affect visibility, patrol routes, and the overall mood of every encounter. Watching the savannah sunrise bleed over a landscape you just set on fire the night before, chef's kiss. Also, let's talk about the fire system, because the devs sure loved it. This was the tech flex of the game. Fire that spreads realistically based on wind, terrain, and fuel sources. And yeah, it was janky sometimes, but lighting a dry patch of grass and watching it devour an enemy camp while you hide in the brush, that was straight up revolutionary for 2008. Character models on the other hand, let's just say Far Cry 2 didn't get the same level of facial animation love as something like Mass Effect, which came out the year before. NPCs all sort of hover in that uncanny valley between rugged mercenary and angry PS2 era mannequin. Their expressions usually range from mildly inconvenienced to terminal constipation. But it doesn't really matter, because in Far Cry 2, you're not there to make friends. You're there to look out over the savannah, squint into the sun, and feel like you haven't blinked in 3 hours. It's not pretty, it's not clean, but it's consistent. And that's what makes it work. The game's visual language supports its themes every step of the way. It doesn't want to immerse you in wonder, it wants to immerse you in suffering. And visually, it's pretty damn effective at that. Now, if you came into Far Cry 2 straight from the original game, the shift in visuals probably hit you like a brick through a CRT monitor. The first Far Cry was all about postcard perfection, neon blue oceans, blinding white sand, and jungle greens so saturated they could power a rave. It was a tech demo in disguise, built to show off CryEngine's ability to render very pretty foliage and very bad dialogue in 2004. Everything looked clean, crisp, and borderline sterile, like a tropical vacation where everyone's packing heat. Far Cry 2 looked at that and said, what if we replaced all that with malaria? Gone were the lush island vibes in sci-fi labs. In their place, parched riverbeds, crumbling towns, and oppressive heat shimmering off the horizon. It wasn't just a change in scenery, it was a philosophical reset. The world of Far Cry 2 wasn't built to be admired, it was built to make you uncomfortable. But Far Cry 1 begged you to fully explore every hilltop for a scenic view. Far Cry 2 dares you to peek over the next ridge without getting shot in the face. And honestly, that's a visual tone shift that deserves some respect. The sound design in Far Cry 2 doesn't want to wow you, it wants to keep you paranoid. It's not about epic orchestral scores or punchy Hollywood gunfights. It's about subtle dread. About hearing a Jeep engine off in the distance and wondering if it's heading your way, or just passing through on its own path of violence. Spoiler alert, it's always heading your way. Let's start with the guns, because oh boy, Far Cry 2 might not have the most satisfying weapon mechanics, but it nails how they sound. Every rifle crack, every shotgun blast, and every rusty pistol shot has this filthy, echoey bite to it. It doesn't sound clean, it doesn't sound precise, it sounds like something you found under a floorboard and hoped still worked. And half the time, it doesn't. And when your gun jams, you hear it. That click-clack stutter is the sound of doom. Especially when you're mid-gunfight and your enemy is already halfway through their aggressive TED Talk with a Desert Eagle. It's a small thing, but the audio feedback makes it hit hard. You don't just see the jam. You feel the tension spike the second that sound kicks in. And then there's the environmental audio, which is a low-key masterclass in immersive subtlety. Crickets at night, wind pushing through the trees, the crackle of a fire you may or may not have accidentally started, the distant echo of gunfire from a fight you're not a part of, yet. It all makes the world feel alive, but never inviting. This isn't ambiance designed to relax you. This is ambiance that keeps you on edge. The soundtrack, composed by Marc Canham, is barely even a soundtrack in the traditional sense. There's no heroic theme or music here, no rousing main motif, just a sparse, moody blend of percussion, tension-building drones, and the occasional "oh god, something's about to go horribly wrong" stinger. The music is more like a heartbeat, always in the background, always slightly elevated, never letting you feel fully safe. Even the voice acting fits the vibe, with characters who all sound exhausted, cynical, or just deeply untrustworthy. Your buddies often mutter like they've smoked a pack a day since birth, and the faction leaders give off the energy of men who sell you out for a case of expired painkillers, which, to be fair, they probably will. And let's not forget the little moments. The sound of your character grunting as they yank a bullet out of their leg with pliers, the splash of swamp water as you limp through the bush, the hiss of your cigarette as you stab it into your wrist for the 5th time in one fight. It's not flashy, but it builds atmosphere in a way that's constantly oppressive. This isn't a game where the audio hypes you up. This is a game where the audio reminds you that you're not in control, you're just temporarily surviving. If Far Cry 2's world is out to get you, then the gameplay is the part that hands it a map, a machete, and a pack of goons in matching jeeps. Combat is raw, clunky, and aggressive, and that's by design. This isn't your usual FPS power fantasy where you're some god-tier sharpshooter mowing down waves of enemies with a custom-tuned arsenal. No. Far Cry 2 gives you rusted out Soviet surplus, hands you a few bullets, and tells you to figure it out while your gun slowly turns to dust in your hands. Weapons fall into 3 main categories: primary, secondary, and special. Think assault rifles and shotguns, sidearms and SMGs, RPGs and sniper rifles. On paper, it sounds standard, but in practice, every weapon you pick up is secretly on a timer, a countdown to inevitable degradation. The more you use them, the worse they get. They start jamming, misfiring, and eventually just shatter in your hands mid-fight, like a betrayal forged in cheap steel. And if you're using a weapon you scavenged from a dead guy, yeah, it's probably already half jammed before you even get a chance to pull the trigger. The only way to get reliable firepower is through weapon shops, unlocked by completing convoy missions. Short adventures where you blow up an arms shipment being driven across the map like it's a Mad Max Uber. Once you unlock a weapon, you can spend diamonds to permanently add them to your loadouts, and most importantly, get them fresh. Fresh guns don't jam, they reload faster, and they don't explode in your hands like a sad firework. You can also pick up weapon manuals and upgrades, like faster reloading or more ammo capacity, but don't expect Call of Duty level gun porn here. It's all practical, grounded, and just barely functional. Speaking of barely functional, let's talk about exploration. The game world is split into 2 large maps, the north and the south region, connected by a central pass that opens partway through the story. On the surface, it's your standard open world: checkpoints, safe houses, outposts, supply crates. But where most games would give you downtime between objectives, Far Cry 2 fills every road, hill, and footpath with patrols and respawning enemies. That checkpoint you just cleared, yeah, it'll be repopulated the next time you blink. That road you thought was clear? Surprise! Jeep with a mounted gun and the world's most aggressive driver. It sounds awful. It is awful. But also, it's weirdly compelling. Every trip becomes a gauntlet. Do you stick to the roads and risk ambush? Or take the long way through the bush, praying you don't get spotted and start a fire you can't outrun? There is a fast travel system, technically. A series of bus stations at fixed points across the map. But using them is like catching a greyhound in a war zone. It's slow, usually inconvenient, and still dumps you miles from wherever you actually need to be. More often than not, it's easier and more fun to just grit your teeth, stock up on cigarettes, and drive headfirst into the madness. And all this travel isn't for nothing, because scattered across the world are roughly 220 diamond briefcases, glowing faintly in the wilderness, taunting you with that little green light on your GPS. They're used as the game's currency, not for buying skins or XP boosters, but for gear that might actually help you not die. It's less collectathon and more desperate scavenger hunt. Each one you find feels earned. And then there's the Jackal tapes, a set of cryptic recordings hidden across both maps that slowly peel back the layers on your main targets. Not with cutscenes, but with raw, unfiltered monologues. No glitzy presentation, no fanfare, just a guy talking into a recorder about how this country's been chewed up and spat out by everyone who came through it, including you. Missions in Far Cry 2 are broken into a few main types, each feeding into this messy ecosystem of survival and instability. The main missions, handed out by either the APR or UFLL, the 2 equally awful factions, are your story progress. They start out simple, sabotage this, kill that, but they rarely go according to plan. The moment you accept one, your active buddy calls you up on the radio with an alternate objective. A buddy mission. These complicate the job by asking you to do something else first, like take out a power station or intercept a convoy. If you do, the mission gets tougher, but your buddy gets XP, your reputation improves, and you might unlock a new safe house or extra support later down the line. Buddy missions are a great way to make you feel like you're working with someone. Right up until they bleed out in your arms because you forgot to carry extra cigarettes. You'll also find new buddies by rescuing them during safe house takeover missions, where you'll find a fellow merc locked up in a room, set them free and they'll join your crew. Leave them, well, Far Cry 2 remembers that too. Outside of the mainline chaos, you've got assassination missions, picked up from cell towers scattered around the map. These are pretty straightforward. Find a guy, kill a guy. Optionally, don't alert his buddies. They're stealthy by design, but more often than not, you'll end up in a blaze of gunfire and regret. Then there are the underground missions, tied to the in-game health system. See, your character has malaria, and the only way to keep yourself from collapsing mid-gunfight is by doing favors for underground contacts, usually delivering passports, medicine, or shady packages. In return, you get malaria pills, which are vital. Ignore them, and your screen will start swimming and glitching out at the worst possible moments, like say while sniping, or running from a fire, or trying to save a buddy. It all blends together in this perfect storm of systems. Janky, unpredictable, and absolutely ruthless. Every mission is a chance for something to go wrong. And when it does, the game doesn't hand you a checkpoint or a retry screen. It just lets you live with it, and sends you right back to where you last remembered to save. Far Cry 2 doesn't just simulate war, it simulates the chaos of trying to survive it with the bare minimum of resources and the maximum number of people trying to kill you. And somehow, even when it's frustrating, even when it's unfair, it still manages to pull you in, because you're not fighting for glory, you're just trying to make it to the next safe house in one piece. The game kicks off with you crammed into the back of a cab, enjoying what would almost be a scenic ride to Paula's only hotel, if not for the subtle soundtrack of gunfire and rising tension outside of the windows. The cab driver gives you a casual rundown of the political hellscape you've just flown into, and it quickly becomes obvious that the country's about 5 minutes away from tearing itself apart. By the time you reach the hotel, things go from bad to worse. Your body betrays you, courtesy of a malaria-induced seizure, and you black out on the spot. You come to in a dingy hotel room, but you're not alone. Standing over you is the Jackal himself, calmly rifling through your mission briefing like he's flipping through a used magazine. You're too weak to move, too sick to even be a threat, and the Jackal knows it. He mocks your failure, casually pointing out that since you couldn't even kill a half-asleep arms dealer, you're no longer a concern. From his perspective, you're already dead, whether it's from a bullet, bad luck, or the parasite chewing through your bloodstream. He launches into a short monologue about how good and evil are fairy tales, and the only thing that matters is power. And right now, he has all of it. Then, almost as an afterthought, he sets down a pistol and a machete beside you and leaves, certain you won't be getting up again. Eventually, you stumble to your feet, only to immediately get caught in the middle of a full-blown firefight between APR and UFLL forces. You take a few rounds and are saved at the last second by a lieutenant from one of the two factions. They patch you up, hand you a gun, and offer you the warmest welcome this war-torn hellhole can manage, a contract. Your first task? Clear out a local safe house crawling with hostiles. After wiping out the squatters, you're sent to free a hostage, a captured mercenary who becomes your first buddy. Someone who, for now at least, doesn't immediately try to kill you. From there, you're directed down to Mike's bar, the unofficial neutral zone of the conflict, where you meet your second best buddy and a war reporter named Ruben Oluwagembi. Ruben isn't your typical press tag-along. He's a hardened journalist who spent his career documenting Africa's bloodiest conflicts, and every war he's covered, one name keeps popping up: the Jackal. Ruben mentions that he's managed to snag a few tapes, recordings of conversations with the Jackal himself, and asks you to keep an eye out for any others during your travels. If you find them, he wants them back. Before you head out, Ruben also points you towards a local church in Pala, where Father Malia, a member of the underground, operates. The priest has access to something you desperately need: malaria medicine. Ruben suggests paying him a visit, and with no better options, you set off to track him down. After meeting the father and securing a much needed supply of anti-malaria meds, the player's next task is simple on paper: work for the factions and find the Jackal. You're dropped into the chaotic political blender of Laboa Sako, where you can initially cozy up to either the UFLL or the APR. Pick your poison. The game lets you flirt with loyalty for a little while, taking missions from one side, pretending you're building trust, but sooner or later, you'll be working for both of them, because in Far Cry 2, loyalty is just another tool, and everyone's happy to use it until it's time to toss you out with the trash. The missions themselves are an all-you-can-eat buffet of atrocities, assassinating police chiefs, destroying malaria medicine shipments, blowing up convoys, you know, regular humanitarian work. As you mop up jobs for both factions, you'll also keep doing underground missions to keep the malaria at bay, ferrying documents and supplies between resistance contacts to earn a fresh batch of pills. One hand takes lives, the other clings to survival. Welcome to Mercenary Work 101. Eventually, after dutifully selling your soul to both sides, the faction you're currently working for will hand you a shiny new assignment. Head down to Goka Falls and assassinate the rival leader. If you're working for the UFLL, your target is Prosper Kawasi, and if you're working for the APR, you're gunning for Leon Gakumba. Either way, the job goes as smoothly as you'd expect, meaning you get ambushed immediately afterward. Turns out, whichever side you were helping decided to clean house, and you were first on their list. Congratulations, you've been set up, double-crossed, and left for dead. After fighting your way out of Goka Falls, you get a call from Ruben, who's waiting at a lumber mill outside of Pala. He lays it all out. Because of your work, the region has erupted into a full-scale offensive. And guess what? You and every other foreign mercenary are now officially traitors. The factions aren't just coming for you, they're gunning for your buddies holed up at Mike's bar, and they're butchering civilians on their way to the church in Pala. Ruben warns you that you only have time to save one group. It's a brutal choice, and no matter what you pick, it ends the same way. Overwhelmed, outgunned, and left for dead in the dirt. Afterwards, the player wakes up piled in the back of a truck full of corpses, headed towards a mass grave in the middle of the desert. They manage to roll off the tailgate, stumbling into a raging sandstorm, and eventually collapse in a makeshift shelter. When they come to, the Jackal is there, patching up your wounds like some desert ghost with a first aid kit. He doesn't gloat, he doesn't threaten. He simply explains that the APR or UFLL, whoever sold you out, will now celebrate their victory the only way they know how, by butchering every man, woman, and child they come across. He describes it like a cancer, a disease that needs to be purged cell by cell. Then, hearing an engine pull up outside, he says his goodbyes and disappears into the storm. A moment later, a faction leader, Nick Greaves if you were betrayed by the UFLL, or Hector Voorhees if it was the APR, walks in, stunned that you're still breathing. He explains that his forces are retreating south into Boa Seco, and, since you're at his mercy, offers you a favor. Go assassinate the rival faction leader, who's currently giving a rallying speech out in the open. He tosses you a truck, a handful of weapons, and points you toward the kill. You make your way down to the rally, watch your betrayer speechify from atop a truck like some 2-bit warlord at a county fair, and put them down for good. After that, you're told to rendezvous with your new friend in the town of Sefapane. There, Greaves or Voorhees pitches you the next grand plan, a false flag operation. With peace talks looming, the faction leaders realize that if Tambosa and Mbantui hammer out a deal, their heads will roll as scapegoats for the entire war. So, naturally, their solution is to reignite the conflict, violently. You're sent to meet another mercenary, on a barge stashed on an island south of Port Salau. The job? Escort a shipment of weapons, marked with the rival faction's insignia, right into the middle of peace talks. Subtle. The escort is chaos, and after blasting your way into Port Salau, you're sent to warn the local doctor about the incoming bloodbath. You also meet another friendly merc, who tips you off to escape through the back before fighting swallows the town whole. By the time you step outside, the ceasefire is already dead. The streets of Port Salau have turned into a war zone, both factions ripping into each other, exactly as planned. After escaping the chaos, you get one final call from your buddy, who was docking the weapons barge. He's been ambushed, and it's up to you to fight through one last skirmish and pull them out of the fire. From there, the bloodshed resumes as normal. Welcome to Boa Seco, where the body count only gets higher, and the chances of walking away clean drop to 0. The hunt for the Jackal continues, and just like before, it's dangled in front of you like a carrot on a broken fishing line. The factions promise leads, intel, sightings, maybe even a location. If you just keep doing their dirty work across Port Salau, missions pile up, targets drop, and eventually, the specter of a peace deal starts creeping back into the conversation. Not good news for warlords who've built their careers on the back of burning villages. One faction, whoever you're currently working for, sends you to recover a briefcase full of diamonds from their rival, promising that once you deliver it, you'll finally get what you came for. But when you head downstairs to leave, your best buddy corners you with a different plan. Screw the factions. Take the diamonds to the airfield, grab a plane, and get the hell out before the war machine eats you alive. You head off to retrieve the briefcase, but when you arrive, things are already sideways. The compound is littered with corpses and blood trials, and when you finally find the faction leader, he's already dead, slumped beside the diamond case like a broken pawn in someone else's game. You grab the case, and that's when the Jackal strikes. He knocks you flat, not with a bullet, but with words. He tells you that peace is a lie, that if the fighting stops, the faction leaders won't become saviors, they'll become dictators, free to exploit and slaughter in the shadows without anyone paying attention. In his mind, Chaos is a better option than quiet corruption. He leaves you unconscious with the diamonds and a pile of dead bodies, setting you up as the perfect scapegoat for the carnage. When you wake up, you're locked in a cell inside of an old prison, battered and barely alive. In the next cell over, you can hear your buddy, the one who warned you, berating you for not listening, cursing you for dragging both of them down with the ship. His rant is cut short by the sounds of a struggle, and then, silence. You're left to break out on your own, bloodied, betrayed, and with the war grinding on outside the crumbling walls. After clawing your way out of the prison, you get a call from either Greaves or Voorhees, whichever faction leader you didn't find dead earlier. They've now stepped up as the head honcho of the APR or UFLL, thanks to the not so suspicious deaths of either Tamboso or Mbantue. Nick or Hector orders you to wipe out the rival faction's leader, promising that with your help, their side will finally crush the opposition. After the deed is done, you're told to meet them at Mossad Salao office to collect your reward. Except when you get there, it's not Nick or Hector waiting for you. If you were expecting Nick, you're greeted by either Walton Purefoy or Arturo Quiepo, and if you're expecting Hector, Joaquin Carbonell or Anto Concaras. These new opportunists quickly cut to the chase. They want you to kill the now leader, Nick or Hector, so they can climb the ladder themselves. You're sent out on another bloody errand, but with a twist. During the mission, you're given the option to spare one of the targets and instead march back to Mossad Salao to kill the person who gave you the job. Pull that off, and you'll trigger a tenuous ceasefire between the battered remnants of the factions, finally bringing the senseless slaughter to a temporary standstill. Of course, nothing in Far Cry 2 is that simple. Right after the mission wraps, Ruben rings you up. He's at the marina and warns you to watch your back. One of your friends is waiting there too. When you arrive, you find yourself face to face with either Joaquin or Anto, or Walton or Arturo. And when talking to Ruben, he sounds grim. He hints that people like him, meaning journalists, aren't long for this world if the factions get their way. He'll call for help if it comes to that. Meanwhile, your friend at the marina pitches you the same tired offer. Kill their rivals and help them seize power. Again, you have the choice. Spare a target or gut the whole deal by eliminating the puppet master back at Mossad Salao. Once you settle things your way, Ruben calls in the big one. He's under attack at the airfield and needs immediate backup. You rush in, fight off waves of militia, and rescue Ruben from inside a besieged hangar. Once the dust settles, Ruben gives you a final lead, one that points straight to the end of the road. The Jackal is at the prison, and if the riot there hasn't torn the place apart already, you're about to finish the job yourself. Once you arrive at the prison, things take a sharp turn. You're not hunting the Jackal anymore, you're working with him. Somehow, some way, the same man who once profited off the endless bloodshed has changed his mind. Now, he wants the war to end. Truly end. And he needs your help to do it. He lays out the plan, head past the prison and complete two tasks. First, recover a stash of diamonds from a crash site. Second, track down and kill the two remaining faction lieutenants holed up at the jungle bivouac. Only once both jobs are done can the final step unfold. Fighting through waves of militia forces, you make your way to the crash site, but the diamonds aren't just sitting there waiting for you. They're guarded by ghosts from your past. Your old allies, the buddies you thought were dead, are alive, desperate and armed. They need the diamonds to escape the country by plane, and they know you have different plans. When you reach for the briefcase, they open fire, forcing you to make another brutal choice. Run or kill the last people you might have called friends. At the jungle bivouac, things aren't much better. The remaining faction forces have united under a fragile ceasefire, and the camp is crawling with mercenaries. Deep within a small hut at the northern edge, the two surviving leaders meet, and you end it. No grand speeches, no chance for redemption, just two more bodies on a pile you've been building the whole game. With both objectives complete, you meet the Jackal one last time at a secluded hut. He explains the real endgame. The diamonds are needed to bribe the border guards, allowing over 2 million refugees to flee the country safely. But there's a catch. One of you must deliver the diamonds and then remove themselves from this plane of existence. A clean exit for a terminal case, with no future in any world worth living in. The other must take a car battery rig to the canyon and manually detonate the explosives, blocking the guards' pursuit at the cost of his own life. The detonator shot, there's no remote option and no second chances. Either way, you die. Not for glory, not for redemption, but so that people you've never met and who will never know your name have a chance at life. In the final moments, your character, battered, broken, and barely human, sacrifices himself to undo even a fraction of the damage he helped cause. The Jackal, true to form, presumably does the same, though his body is never found. The unnamed African country remains torn apart, a scar on the map. Ruben's story, your story, is ignored by the wider world, relegated to a lonely blog post no one reads. Your exact fate remains ambiguous, a ghost in a land full of them. But for once, something good came from the bloodshed. Far Cry 2 doesn't open with a bang, it opens with a fever. You're a nameless mercenary, one of 9 hired killers flown into a nameless African country in the middle of a brutal civil war. 2 factions are fighting over control, the APR and the UFLL. And just like every other faction war in a video game, they're both equally awful, corrupt, violent, opportunistic. They'll smile to your face while handing you a pistol and a list of people they want dead by sundown. Your mission? Kill the Jackal, an arms dealer who's been selling weapons to both sides, profiting off the chaos. It's a clean setup, black and white. Stop the guy who's fueling the war, but Far Cry 2 doesn't do clean. Within minutes of landing, your character collapses from malaria. The Jackal finds you, gives you a pseudo-intellectual monologue about human nature, leaves you a gun and walks away. He doesn't kill you, he just lets the country do it for him. And from that moment on, the story isn't told through cutscenes or quick-time events, it's told through consequences. You start doing missions for the factions: sabotage, assassination, bribery, destabilization. You work both sides because you have to, because that's how the system works. Every mission you complete makes the war worse. Leaders get paranoid, civilians die off screen, and the power vacuum grows wider. And through it all, the Jackal watches. He knows you're just another cog in the machine. Another outsider pretending to fix something while quietly making it worse. And then, the game twists the knife. At a certain point, after you've carved your way through enough of the country's infrastructure and lied to enough warlords to make Machiavelli blush, you get betrayed. Doesn't matter how careful you were, who you helped, or how many friends you made. You get ambushed, shot, left for dead, dumped in a ditch like yesterday's contract. The buddies that are still alive by that point are the ones who do it. They'll sell you out for the diamonds. The same diamonds you've been earning, stealing, trading, and bleeding for. That stings, because up until then, they were your lifeline, your backup, the only people in this hellhole who showed you a shred of humanity. And now they're trying to kill you for a payday. But maybe some of them are already dead. Maybe you got them killed, or left them behind. If so, the betrayal still comes, just by a different set of buddies, every time. Either way, the message is the same. You are not special. You're not a hero. You're a mercenary with a hit list and a parasite in your blood. And this world has no room for sentimentality. From there, the game enters its final act. The facade of choosing sides completely drops, and the objective becomes clear: burn it all down. The leaders of both factions, Tambosa of the UFLL and Mbantui of the APR, or whoever is still alive at that point, are now obstacles, not clients. You kill them, not because it helps, but because it's the only way to shut the machine off. You destroy the last remnants of organized power in the region and watch the country collapse into a vacuum. And then you find the Jackal. He's not surprised to see you. In fact, he's been waiting. Because at this point, he knows you understand what he's been saying all along. That the war wasn't about ideology, or justice, or freedom. It was about money, power, and people like us. Outsiders who come in thinking we can fix things with guns, and leave only after the body count is too high to ignore. He offers you 2 choices: not to escape, not to win, but to atone. Either you take the diamonds, bribe the border guards to let a convoy of refugees out of the country, and then walk into the woods with a pistol and 1 bullet. Or you fight your way up a cliffside loaded with dynamite and blow yourself up to block the pass, ensuring the militia can't chase after the civilians fleeing the war zone. There is no good ending, there's no victory, just a quiet, final act of damage control. You die either way, because this isn't your story, it's the country's, and you were always just a footnote in it. But if Far Cry 2 has a soul, or what's left of one, it's the Jackal. He's introduced in the first 10 minutes, lounging in your safe house like he owns the place, which, in a way, he does. He's not here to kill you, he's here to talk, to wax philosophically about how people don't change, how violence begets more violence, and how you're not here to stop the war, you're just one more gun in the mix, and then he vanishes. From that moment on, the Jackal becomes a specter in the game, never far, but never in reach. You hear about him through radio chatter, through panicked warlords, through cassette tapes scattered across the map like breadcrumbs from a man who's already accepted his own damnation. He's not chasing power, he's not building an army, he's just watching everything collapse and taking notes. What makes him fascinating is that he's right, not in a cartoonishly evil way, not in a Bond villain I told you so kind of way. He's right in the worst, most uncomfortable way possible, the morally corrosive kind, the kind where his actions, fueling the conflict, playing both sides, are utterly indefensible, but his reasoning starts to make sense the longer you exist in the same space as he does.
What do you think you're going to achieve with this interview? You think somebody in the Pentagon's gonna read it and come after me? Shit, no. I'm a necessary evil. They want me here. They're glad I'm here. Because if I wasn't, they might have to come try to stem the tide. It would be thankless and worthless, and once the bodies started coming home in bags, they're screwed. A dead 23-year-old from Iowa gets more airtime than the death of 50,000 people he gave his life to protect. So even if they did give a shit, their own media prevents them from taking action.
The more you do, the more blood you spill, the more you realize you're not just chasing the Jackal, you're becoming him. A man who thought he was doing the job, who gave up on fixing anything and decided the best he could do was to put the whole system out of its misery. By the time you finally find him again, he's not holding a gun, he's holding a plan, a way for both of you to remove yourselves. Not to save the country, but to stop hurting it. He's calm, resolute, and in a twisted way, empathetic. Because unlike every other character in the game, the Jackal doesn't lie to you. He never promises salvation, only closure. He's not the final boss, he's the final truth. And by the time you reach him, there's a good chance you'll agree with what he's saying. Not because the game forces you to, but because it slowly, quietly, makes you live through the same hell as he did. At its core, Far Cry 2 is a game about futility. Everything you do, every mission, every life saved, every warlord killed, only deepens the instability. You work for two factions, and in the end, you kill both their leaders. You try to make a difference, and the only meaningful thing you can do is remove yourself. The Jackal isn't just the antagonist. He's a twisted mirror of your character, someone who saw the horror firsthand and decided the only moral thing left to do was to facilitate a mutually assured destruction. His philosophy, cold, clinical, but disturbingly logical, frames the entire experience. Some systems are so broken, they can't be fixed. They can only be ended. And what makes it hit harder is that the game never tells you what to think. There's no morality meter, no dialogue options. Just action and consequence. You don't get to be a savior, you barely get to be a survivor. Your buddies, they're people like you. Selfish, scared, clinging on to survival in a world that keeps shifting under their feet. Sometimes they help you, sometimes they die, sometimes they stab you in the back. Not because they're evil, but because they're desperate, just like you. Far Cry 2 doesn't want you to feel powerful, it wants you to feel accountable. In a gaming landscape full of chosen ones and world savers, this game looked you dead in the eyes and said, you're just another merc with a gun, and you only made things worse. When Far Cry 2 launched in 2008, critics didn't really know what to make of it. Some called it a masterclass in immersion, others called it a beautiful mess. Everyone agreed it was ambitious. But not everyone was thrilled about what that ambition looked like in practice. On paper, it was a technical marvel. Huge open world, dynamic weather, fire physics that could reduce an entire forest to ash in seconds. Reviewers praised its visuals, praised its systems, praised the fact that it dared to do something different. And then immediately turned around and complained about malaria, gun jamming, and about how every outpost respawned faster than your patience. The game floated around the 8 out of 10 zone, with just enough goodwill to justify its boldness, and just enough criticism to scare off the average player looking for a fun night of safari shootouts. But something strange happened over the years. While Far Cry 3 polished the formula into mainstream gold, with charismatic villains, skill trees, and crafting systems, Far Cry 2 slowly grew a cult following. A group of players and critics who looked back and said, wait, this game was doing something deeper, something darker, more deliberate, and way more emotionally draining. YouTubers started revisiting it. Game designers couldn't shut up about its emergent systems. Entire essays were written about its atmosphere, its world building, its bleak commitment to consequence. It became the thinking person's Far Cry, the I like my shooters existential and slightly broken option. Even developers have cited it as an influence, not just for the tech, but for its narrative design, its refusal to hold your hand, and its insistence that maybe, just maybe, you should be having fun all the time. Some called it a proto-immersive sim, others called it a beautiful failure. Both are true. And while Ubisoft never really tried anything quite like it again, Far Cry 2 stands as this fascinating outlier in this series. A grim middle child that wasn't afraid to bite the hand that played it. It didn't care if you liked it. It just wanted to make sure you remembered it. And 16 years later, I still do. So that's Far Cry 2. A game that doesn't want to be loved, just understood. It's clunky, it's brutal, it's constantly trying to kill you. But there's a strange beauty in how committed it is to its vision. It doesn't give you power, it gives you responsibility, then watches what you do with it. You're not a hero, you're just a guy with a rusty gun, a pocket full of diamonds, and a terminal case of poor decision making. And somehow, that makes Far Cry 2 one of the most honest shooters ever made. If you've bounced off it before, I get it, but with the Redux mod smoothing out the roughest edges, there's never been a better time to give it another shot. Just don't get too attached to your buddies, or your guns, or your soul. So, thanks for watching to the end of this video. If you enjoyed, leave a like, a comment, and subscribe, as I have 286 more games to cover between now and the inevitable heat death of the universe. Follow me on Twitter and join the Discord. I've been Xeniverse, and I'm off to stop an intergalactic death cult.